Welcome to the 11 Warriors show. Jason Priestess, Chris Lauterbach coming to you early this Thursday morning after early signing day. Chris, how are you, man?
I'm doing pretty good after a pretty eventful evening.
Yeah? Went late. I think, 10 o'clock or so p.m., Jeremiah Smith's national letter of intent finally rolled in to Ohio State. We'll talk about that more in a second, but no panic on Ohio State's side. I think there's some folks on Twitter that had their panic on a little bit. The five-star wide receiver just getting in finally, but
he's gone.
Yeah, this 24 class, man, it ended up with 21 players. Number 4 nationally behind Georgia, Alabama, and Miami. Miami's got 27 in their class. I mean, you look at the per player rating, it's 92.92 at Ohio State, second in the country behind only Georgia. Number 1 class in the Big Ten. Again, number 2 in per player average. Another really, really good class. 5 5-stars ended up signing with Ohio State. It's the most in the country, and it's 5 times more than the rest of the Big Ten combined. And I'm counting, when I say rest of the Big Ten, I'm counting UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon. I mean, it's the new 18-team conference here.
Yeah, and Oregon that's 6th in the country, by the way. Yeah.
Had a great class, but no 5-stars. Only other 5-star in the Big Ten, Dylan Raiola, the quarterback that went to Nebraska. A one-time Ohio State commit, too. Could have been 6 5-stars for the Bucks, but we'll see him down the road. Let's talk about some of those 5-stars, man. Wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, the man in the class. Huge keep for Ohio State. There was some buzz early yesterday morning that maybe Miami was making a late push, and they did. Offered a lot on the NIL front. Mario Cristobal's putting together a really good class. Mom wanted him to stay a little closer to home, and he's a Florida kid from South Florida, so a lot for him to like about Miami. But 13 minutes or so into Ryan Day's noon signing day presser yesterday, Ohio State GM Mark Pantoni popped his head in and interrupted Coach and said, I got some good news for you that Smith was honoring his Ohio State commitment. He did that at a ceremony, put the Ohio State hat on. This is around, a little after noon, and then 10 hours go by, and he finally sends in his national letter of intent. Wanted to, get all the finer points ironed out, but he signed, sealed, and delivered, and it's, again, huge key for Ohio State. There are a lot of people on Ohio State staff that think he's the best high school wide receiver they've ever seen.
Yeah, his tape obviously is pretty impressive for sure. Prototype X receiver, got the size, got the athleticism, got the hands, everything. Definitely looks like the total package. And obviously they think that for the lengths that they went to get him, like you said, it sounded like a lot of wrangling into the evening hours for sure to get everything lined up. And you don't do that for the 3-star guy. So yeah, a lot on the line there for Ohio State, not just to get that player, but I think optically after how things were going down the stretch, right? I just can't even imagine how they would feel if, in Heartline, if Jeremiah Smith got away after all this time of him being committed and some of the other, fish that they lost. Of course, they held on to some guys. We'll talk about that. But, most of those losses were on the defensive side of the ball. But, Smith was big for the talent that he brings for sure. But I just think also optically for the program that, hey, you can compete in this NIL space and you can, hang on to that elite prospect that you've had committed versus kind of that, that swoop in late and flip a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, committed for almost over a full year, basically, to Ohio State. Freak of an athlete, composite number 1 player on 24/7 Sports. Expect him to see the field really early. He's that good.
Well, I think it's a great point. The other thing I meant to mention was that they don't do all that also for, I know, 3 years, this, that, and the other, but yeah, a kid's expecting obviously more than a payout. For his, just his talent and the services that he's putting out there for folks. He's going to see the field next year.
Yep. And what a luxury to be a quarterback at Ohio State next season and knowing he's one of several good targets you're going to have to throw to. Another of those guys, another 5-star wide receiver, Mylan Graham, Indiana guy. What a dude. He might be my favorite guy in the class. And he's a 5-star wideout. He was unranked, had 0 stars when Ohio State found him and offered him. Had a great senior season, got all the way up to a 5-star. He was, Ohio State was his first offer. He's put in the work, kept his head down, signed, made it really easy, came to Ohio State, wanted to be a Buckeye. excited to see him on the field, and Ohio State fans are going to love Mylan Graham.
Yeah, I think it's awesome for a whole bunch of reasons. I really like how he complements Jeremiah Smith. It's not like they play the same position. Like we said, Jeremiah Smith's that prototype X, boundary side guy, a one-on-one guy that's going to beat press coverage. And then you've got, Mylan's more of that Z. He's going in motion. He's, going to do some work underneath, going to do all those other kinds of things, getting him in space and whatnot. And, considering they lost a receiver yesterday to Oregon, which I'm sure we'll hit on, the top two guys out of those three are Buckeyes as of last night's signing.
Absolutely. Another 5-star defensive end, Eddrick Houston from Buford High School in Georgia. Down to the wire, man. He was going to Alabama, I believe, and Ohio State made a late push, and he stuck with his Ohio State commitment. A lot of those Buford guys are kind of nudged towards Alabama. There's something going on down there with an affinity between the coach and Nick Saban, and honestly, it's not a hard nudge. I mean, Alabama sells itself. So Ohio State stepped up and kept him. What was wild, though, is the start of the presser at noon yesterday, Houston was thought to maybe be going to Alabama. People were worried about Jeremiah Smith. And one of the first questions Day was asked was about Larry Johnson. Yeah. And Day kind of stepped behind his guy.
It's funny. Guys have brought that up over the years in recruiting, but he's young. He's, in terms of his approach every day, he's got a lot of energy, and he wants to continue to coach. And, the guys in the room love him. And so, he's still got a lot of energy when it comes to coaching, and he still has a passion for coaching. And, his wisdom, his experience is the best in the country. And our guys know that, and people recognize that in recruiting.
Yeah, he was pretty emphatic, and that was even before the phone call came in from Houston that he was committing to Ohio State. So, yeah, pretty clear, because I don't think at that moment Day knew for sure what Houston was going to be doing. No. But he was still team Larry Johnson. And they've had a lot of guys, get away that they were either had commits from or were flirting pretty heavily with that did not sign. Only ended up with 2 in the class. But yeah, and that was after Day also said too. I think he had a question of asking him how he evaluates his assistant coaches, and it was attracting talent and developing talent. And obviously Larry's track record is that he's done those things, right? But if you look more recently, I think a critic could have some bullet points they could list that would have some merit. But clearly Day likes everything that LJ is still bringing to the table. I think he's 72, like you said, talking about being young at heart and those things, and getting Houston was gigantic. Still feels like they might have a little bit of work to do. We'll see who comes back, but I'm not sure they're done getting defensive linemen in this class from portal or otherwise.
Yeah, and LJ is one of those guys. I mean, he's a very divisive right now in the fan base. So half the fans want him gone immediately. And I mean, it's wild to me because I don't know whether I have an opinion on wanting him gone. And I'm not saying that those that do are wrong per se, but 5 years ago, that would have been blasphemous to say, because he was one of the crown jewels on the staff. And then the argument, as he's getting older and you touched on his age and some of these losses on the recruiting trail are starting to pile up a little bit, but they deal with it every year. The negative recruiting around, hey, LJ is going to retire. LJ's going to retire. Why would you want to go there? He won't be your coach the entire time you're there. But Eddrick Houston, another big keep for Ohio State. 5-star cornerback Aaron Scott right down the road in Springfield. Again, chose the Buckeyes a while ago over Michigan, and that was a fun commitment. And the other 5-star composite in the class is quarterback Aaron Nolan, coming in next year, and that'll be a lot of fun to watch him as well. 5 stars, again, led the country there. Looking at some of the other players in the class, 2 running backs, got James Peoples from Texas and Sam Williams-Dixon from Pickerington. 4 wide receivers on the day. They had 5. You touched on this briefly. Lost Jeremiah McClellan to Oregon on signing day. They made a really, really attractive NIL offer to him. And I think there was some concern in their camp that, he was coming in as kind of the third guy behind Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham, and did what, he thought was best for himself. So you can't hate a kid for doing that.
Yeah, I don't begrudge him. I think that if you're going to be able to absorb a loss, I mean, certainly it's a little easier to do in the wide receiver room at Ohio State than, the defensive line or offensive line or some of these other places. So you hate to lose a guy, but it's a room where you can absorb it. And it was also the third highest rated guy out of the 3 that you thought you might land yesterday. So yeah, I think they feel good. And like I said earlier, I do like that Smith and they don't play the same position, right? So having Graham and having Smith come in and really do different things, and hell, who knows? I mean, Egbuka could still be back, and even if he's not, you got Tate, you got you got guys.
Yeah.
They're going to be young guys, but they are guys that you are expecting can step in and play.
Yeah, 5 stars everywhere, pretty much. Bucks got 4 offensive linemen, 2 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, 6 DBs. Another near 5-star from Glenville. You got Bryce West up there, and he was almost a 5-star, but very high 4-star in the composite. Yeah. Wild day overall. I mean, we're going to talk about this in a second. Recruiting has always been a little nutty, but yesterday was particularly nutty. Day was asked, how he felt at the end of the day and what he was looking forward to, and here's what he had to say.
What has this day been like for you?
I mean, the first beer is going to taste good. I can tell you that right now. Yeah, well, whichever one's the coldest. No, it's this is signing day, and when you have really good players, it's going to come down to the wire, and that's how it goes.
And that who doesn't like a cold one at the end of the day, right?
I think he's earned it. A lot of recovery. Again, still a lot of hand wringing out there in Buckeye Nation, because that's what Buckeye Nation does. But to end up with what right now is the number 4 class, feels like it's a little top heavy at certain position groups. But man, to hang on to those 2 biggies was definitely not a small accomplishment. Yeah,
for sure. Who do you like in the class? Who else jumps out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot to like with the big names that you mentioned, but or that we've already talked about. But James Peoples, to me, we touched on him very briefly, but I think it's a running back that can do everything. I like those running backs like Travion, right? That can catch the ball out of the backfield, can do some things. I think they really like Peoples' versatility, so that's going to be interesting. And we touched briefly, but Aaron Scott was such a big one to get, right? Keeping a kid in state that was certainly drawing some interest from Michigan and felt like it was mutual. Those are a couple that stick out to me the most. But I guess if you go a little bit further, maybe under the radar, I guess I would say they really need a linebacker to pan out, right? Whether it's Garrett Stover or Peyton Pierce, don't think that's happening as freshmen, but would be nice to kind of get back to where you could make a case of linebacker U around here, and it's been a minute, so hoping that one of those guys can evolve over time to be the true.
What about concerns? And I think one that jumps out is just the one linebacker and some of the stuff on the defensive line. If Eddrick Houston had gotten away, man, that would have been a big problem, because, High State feels good about what their interior on the DL, but some of the DE depth is, particularly if JTT and Jack, whatever they decide to do, but they're not going to be here for more than a year at least. They're giving you one more maybe, and maybe gone after the bowl or what have you. But the DE depth is a little bit of concern right now.
Yeah, I think even across the board, I think because you don't know what all these tackles are going to do yet either with Hall, Tyleek and Mike Hall Jr. So I know they're, been in contact with Michigan State defensive lineman that could potentially be a transfer. So defensive line, I think, is definitely, on the list for me. But honestly, I think, offensive line is maybe even more so for me. I think in this class, like you said, I mean, Deontay Armstrong's a 4-star. His brother's a 3-star. And then they had a Gabe Van Sickle that was a 3-star guard as well. Not really any true blue chips in there, I don't think. So, those guys can be developed and that's all well and good. But I think, as much as there was hand wringing about this year's offensive line, they were damn lucky that they never really had any injuries, because they really didn't have any depth. Mm-hmm. So next year, you don't know exactly who's going to come back. Will Donovan Jackson be back? What's that going to look like? Obviously, a lot of the other pieces will be, but I think you still have some depth concerns there. Knowing that offensive line is different than defensive line, and that your offensive line, if they're healthy to play every snap, they're going to do that. But how many years in a row will you go without having an injury? And they were just really lucky that they didn't have a long termer, this past year. So they've really got to develop some guys. And I think I'm probably just as concerned about offensive line recruiting as I am defensive line recruiting at this point in time.
Yeah, tough on it. And some of these will be portal desires, for lack of a better word. Linebacker, offensive line depth, DE depth maybe. We'll have to see what shakes out. There was some consternation. They were not maybe moving in the portal as quickly as some fans wanted to, but it seems like every day you hear a new name pop out. And you're like, well, that's a really good player. And, some things are going to shake out that maybe we don't know yet.
Yeah, definitely not done. And I think, also too, they're not sure what holes they're going to have. I mean, you just mentioned some names, right? Like you really don't know who's going to stay or go, and it's hard to go get a guy when they don't really know who they're going to be potentially competing against, right? Like I think in this day and age, everybody just feels like it's always about money. These guys want to see the field also. Mm-hmm. So you've really got to know who is it that you're, who else is in that group, right? If I'm trying to get on the field, and I think until some things with JT or, you assume Sawyer's going to be back, but, until those things come to fruition, understanding what, Tyleek and Mike Hall and those guys do, it's hard to really do much there, specifically on the defensive front. So I think that's where the portal obviously comes into play, and they probably got some guys, I'm sure they have guys that they're talking to. It's just a matter of and rightfully so, they need to understand how they think that's going to shake out before they would, commit to a school.
Some other presser news. Dave was asked about Cotton Bowl prep, and kind of, something we expected would be the Devin Brown show, and he would get the lion's share of the snaps. And he basically confirmed that, said, Lincoln Kienholz will be in there, but only if it allows itself. It's not going to be like one guy gets the first quarter, another guy gets the second quarter, or anything like that. Lincoln will play if if Devin gets hurt, or if Ohio State has a big lead, or something similar. But it sounds like it's going to be Devin's show for the entire game.
Yeah, I think he's trying, which, makes sense. I mean, this year, if it wasn't for the injury, Brown had obviously worked himself into some red zone packages, and there's a chance that role could have expanded a little bit. Some of that was probably what Kyle wasn't doing as much as it was what Devin might be doing.
Right.
But it still felt like there was a pretty decent gap between, Brown as the second stringer versus Kienholz as the third stringer, right? Like Brown was much, there was that portion in camp where it felt like Brown had surged ahead, and there was the coaches voted, and, it was kind of split, and, maybe they were favoring Brown, but Day wasn't favoring, all that kind of stuff. So it felt like that was a little more neck and neck than certainly the battle for second string was. So
right.
Day said he was trying to win this game. Like, I know a lot of fans, really myself included, I consider it more as an exhibition and a look forward to next year. But if Day, who knows quarterbacks, feels like Brown is definitely the clear-cut guy in the moment, then we want to see him play a good defense anyway. As at least as fans, you don't learn squat in the spring game. So being able to see him go against a Missouri team that's clearly going to be motivated in this game, I think would be great. And then when Kienholz can get the 15 practices and get more, then okay, let's see what you got. Just like, let's see what Aaron Olin's got. But right now it feels like, I totally get him hoping that, as we all should be, that Brown throws for 300 yards and runs for 50 and, and looks pretty good doing it, kind of thing. So I'm not surprised at all that that's kind of not just the pecking order, but the way he's expecting the snaps to distribute in the bowl game.
Absolutely. And speaking to next year, Day kind of demurred when asked if they were looking for maybe a quarterback in the portal, and said he expected a competition between Brown, Kienholz, and Nolan next year. Here's what he had to say about that.
Yeah, I think that competition is very, very healthy. I think Lincoln's really been coming on. Excited to see Air, get going here this spring. But fired up to see the way Devin's been practicing the last few weeks. It's been great for him. Now that he's healthy, his ankle's feeling better, and kind of like, okay, take this thing and run and see how the next couple of weeks go in terms of the way he handles himself. Excited that he's going to be able to play in this game, and then just go from there.
And that makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is what it is at this point. I think he feels like he's got his guys in the room, and we'll see how it all plays out. But hell, a couple weeks ago, I thought McCord would be the starter going into next year, but I do feel like next year's starter's on the team.
Yep, agree 100%. We touched on it earlier. Signing day was bonkers in Columbus. I mean, certainly you could ask a Gator fan, and I don't think they had a lot of fun yesterday. It was pretty bonkers for them. Bonkers for a lot of people right now, because it was always kind of crazy. We're old enough, and 11 Warriors have been online long enough. Do you remember when the Bama had the fax machine girls wearing like houndstooth skirts, and you're like, whoa, I don't know if that would fly these days. It's always been, a production, some theater, some flips, and, Urban certainly ratcheted things up when he got here and made it even more of a spectacle. But, so you've always had that. And then you add NIL and the transfer portal, and it is insane right now. Just like on another level, and I think fans are, coming to terms with it and trying to understand it, but it's always been crazy. It's crazier than ever now. You have parents that are really, really involved in the process, more so than in the past. In the past, you'd have maybe a dad that loved the school and would kind of steer his kid to that school, or maybe other parents that say, I want Johnny to go wherever Johnny wants to go. But now, I mean, there's financial incentives on the line. There's real money.
Financial incentives.
Yeah, real money that can help families that, may need it or may desire that. That's a big factor. It's certainly different in the South. You talk to prospects up north, and NIL compensation is something they're looking for. But it may be second, it may be a 1B, there could be other reasons. In the South, it's the first thing that prospects ask. And the South is where a lot of the really, really good talent is too. So you've got to go down there and get some of those guys. Another thing too is you're looking at Miami with 27 in their class and the number 3 composite class right now. And not to say this is going to happen to them, or they would behave this way, but there are a lot of schools that will make NIL promises for things they can't cash later. And you saw that at Texas A&M a couple years ago when that monster class just blew up. Ohio State won't do that. They're not going to commit to something they don't feel like they can with the 1870 Society or other collectives. They can fulfill down the road, if that makes sense. And we're going to sound like homers, but just having worked with them in some capacity with the 1870 Society, Ohio State is a very compliant place, a very by the rules place. And, a Michigan fan might be watching this and rolling his eyes, but it's true. It's absolutely true. We started to see some fans complain about that on Twitter a little bit. We should break the rules like they do down south and do it like they do. But that's just not in Ohio State's DNA. So there's some things at play there. And if you're angry about Jeremiah McClellan getting away to Oregon, well, the nice thing about Oregon is Phil Knight really likes sports, right? He's got a ton of money. And there's no Phil Knight in Columbus. The richest guy in Columbus may like sports, but may like, retail a lot better than sports, right?
Or his name on the medical building or something like that. But it's not boohoo for Ohio State. I don't think, Ohio State's not broke and doesn't have options either. But they
can't. Ohio State cannot pay players, though. It has to come from a local business or an individual or something like that.
I'm just saying that, whether it's alumni, business, whatever, it's not like this isn't Mississippi State either. I hear there's probably a different way of just how you operate, but I think what has to happen is just crack the code on those resources, because I think those resources are there, right? Like it's not like they're no alumni or no one that cares about Ohio State football. None of them have money. That is, definitely not the case. And I don't think that's disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just, I think they got to figure out, hey, how do you tap in to all of that a little bit deeper? But at the same time too, everybody's going to freak out about who you don't get. Like, it felt like there was more negative than positive on Twitter today. And Ohio State's walking out of here with the, number 4 ranked class when, the clock struck midnight last night. So
five stars.
Like I said, you can argue about balance of certain position groups and things like that, totally get some of that, but it's not like, the cupboard is bare around here. It's really, what are you going to do? How are you going to develop that talent? And when you get into these big games, how are you going to execute in those games with that talent? What's Michigan sitting on, the 15th ranked class or something like that? You can win with lesser stars. Stars matter. But it's, what are all those other things? What does your assistant coach room look like? What do your, those other staffers that, Alabama's got 50 of? How are you deploying those guys to make sure you get the right edge in a game, all that kind of stuff. But this recruiting stuff, to circle back around to the point though, is it's definitely not, back in the day, we kind of knew who was doing what and dropping bags and whatever. And now it's just a completely different ball game. And these kids today, like you said, with their parents too, I don't know what reasonable other than money that you go to Miami. I guess Miami Beach, but if you want to win, or if you like Mario Cristobal, like what, I don't understand how that's where you want to go unless it's purely
master tactician, right? End of game genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stay at home obviously would be something that is big, ease of travel for family and things like that. But, you touched on like the money in town. And I think that one of the struggles we've had is kind of engaging some of these high net worth individuals. And most of the NIL success so far, honestly, has been through grassroots and some innovative corporate deals. But it's frustrating in a sense, because these are the same folks, the high net worth guys that are wealthy beyond your imagination.
Oh yeah, and bitch about
they love Ohio State too. They get crazy for games too. They watch and they punch their sofa too. They're not like wearing a tuxedo and acting indifferent to the outcome on the game. So it'd be really cool if we could get some more lean in from that. Something else too, like Ohio State was in it for a Florida defensive line commit, Amaris Williams, and he ended up flipping to Auburn, but Ohio State was trying to flip him. And Auburn was able to offer a pretty nice NIL package for him. And this is going to sound weird in a sense, but like Auburn was 6-6, and if you have a 6-6 team, it's almost it doesn't make sense in the fact that like bad teams have more flexibility to go get players from the portal and to sign prospects because you're not worried about retaining guys. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
a lot
you're not
less
worried about
budget. Retaining, and you can see the field early, most likely, if you're 6-6.
Right. And a lot less of your budget has to go to keeping guys that are part of your culture, part of your programs that, build 11-1 or 10-2 teams. So if you're 6-6, you oftentimes have a little more flexibility and a little more budget to go out and get other guys. And again, Oregon's Oregon, man. Phil Knight. It just takes one really rich fan. Like if there's a guy in Tallahassee right now, he's got $200 million to his name and he loves Florida State, they can build a dynasty. It's that simple. So, I would just advise fans to kind of buckle up for these. And I wouldn't want to be a college coach, man. I would not. I would rather be an NFL coach right now. The portal, NIL, which is basically like a pseudo salary cap for your team, keeping everyone in the room happy, making sure everyone's taken care of, getting the right players. And this stuff comes right in the middle of your postseason preparation. Like it's Bill Belichick coaches for like 5 months, and February's done, and then he comes back in June for mini camp, and that's about it, right? I mean, much easier life in the NFL.
Yeah. I don't think either one of them are easy, but I think the college coach right now, just so many things that you don't even. There's no real playbook on how to navigate. And you're not even sure what are the rules, right? Like, Ohio State's we comply, like totally get all that, but there's other stuff where it's just like, what is the gray? Because this stuff really isn't, uber defined yet. But even just the timing of this stuff, like imagine trying to get ready for the playoffs right now, let alone, an exhibition game. And you're trying to navigate signing day, hang on to these guys. You're trying to, see what's out there in the portal, but you can't really do everything in the portal until you know what guys you're actually losing from your current team. Like all that stuff that they've at least got to figure out, like, hey, we probably need to move signing day back to February or something where there's an even earlier one and then a February one, something. I don't profess to know the best answer there, but I don't think December 20th is really the right move anymore. And that's only going to get worse with an expanded playoff because you're going to be preparing for very meaningful games, already, right? Yeah. So it just seems untenable. I mean, today's presser, and I know it's, again, not a meaningful bowl game for this season per se, but questions about that didn't even come up until 45 minutes into the presser, and not really any question about Missouri or, that'll come next week. Like I get some of that, but it's just amazing. Like they're literally getting ready for a game, and it's like more than halfway into the presser, it's like, yeah, we got some good practices. What, like, oh, that's right, you guys play next Friday. Like it's just right. It's wild.
It is. So again, buckle up and let's hope for a little bit of reform. I think one thing that will truly drive reform fast is tampering. It's so big, it's so out there, and coaches hate it, and when they all universally hate it. I mean, they probably like it when it works in their favor the few times, but it works against them. Those are going to stick in their brains, and it's something they're pretty united on. So I think that we will get some kind of reform soon. It won't be like this forever, but this year, maybe next year, just enjoy the ride and try not to get too up or down because it's insane right now. It truly is.
I still know how you govern that though, right? I mean, how you govern? They can't really govern anything.
They're going to break away.
Now,
they'll break away. They'll break away. They'll be like a football only conference. They'll have some type of commissioner. They'll learn from past mistakes. They'll have subpoena power, which the NCAA doesn't have. They'll do it right, but it may not be for 24, 48 months before it gets here either.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. Yeah, it's going to be more than a year or two if they're going to break off and do their own thing and do it right. That's going to it will take a minute. It's the right move, but it is going to it'll be a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. Some other news, recent news. Kyle McCord is heading to Syracuse. Announced his transfer commitment on Sunday, and he will be the quarterback for the Orange. And some thoughts about that, man. Like, it says a lot to me that there's a lot of good teams right now. Oregon has got some guys, but they needed some quarterbacks. Florida State's looking. There's some really top tier teams that needed quarterbacks. And he ended up, maybe trying to get into Nebraska until they got Dylan Raiola. And then, he ends up at Syracuse, which is, to be fair, not an elite team, right?
No, I mean, it's an ACC also ran is really what it is. We'll see what Fran can do there. Never been a head coach, but I think he's got some pedigree. So we'll see how it pans out. I hope it goes well for all involved there. Quite honestly, I don't have anything against Kyle McCord, really. I think Day, said all the right things in the presser today as well. But yeah, it is interesting because for all the hand wringing about it, if you look at 24/7's ranking of the quarterbacks in the portal, whether they were in or they're out now, or what it was, number 11 or something like that. There were literally a couple of quarterbacks I had not heard of that were slotted higher than McCord.
Yeah. And what does it say too about the talent on the team, or maybe some of the games on the schedule that, with a very, okay quarterback, good, maybe not great, that they went 11-1, and we're within, a one score of knocking off the number one team in their house.
Mm-hmm. Well, it speaks to when we were recapping a lot of those games. You're like watching the game and you're so frustrated with the quarterback play. You see a wide open guy down the middle, or you see an intentional grounding for the fourth time or whatever. But then you look up and you're like 270 yards passing and 3 touchdowns and normally not a pick.
9 for 11 on third down in the second half.
Yeah. But to your point, how much of that was he's got an arm, he can make some throws, but the processing of information and and some of those things that just reading the defense and whatnot felt like my eyes are not really deceiving me. It's just this machine of Ohio State, which by the way was underwhelming offensively compared to normal Ohio State, right? 34, 35 points a game or something like that. Felt like 17 in a lot of those games. So I feel like not trying to stomp on the dude's grave, but whether Brown or whomever else can make some magic happen next year, I feel like you still generally saw what you felt like McCord's ceiling was, and I know he's the one that initiated the moving on. It feels like, but I'm personally completely at peace with that.
Yep. Best of luck, Kyle. I will just leave it at that, and I'll pull for him a little bit. If I catch a Cuse game on TV next year, I want him to
play in Miami. I will.
Yeah, I'm not going to hate on the guy. I want him to have some success, and I hope he has a happy life and things work out for him. But clearly not the play that Day in Ohio State need at quarterback. And I think that's fair to say. It's tough to say that because these are young men and whatnot. But
There seem like two different opinions on the level of play too between him and maybe Day, right? Like pretty demanding after the Michigan game, wanting to know what's up next year when you just look back on it and like, well, bro, I don't know if you saw that last game, but
did you notice?
You weren't all that awesome in it.
Bowl season, we're in the thick of it finally, and there was a good one Monday. Got to see my Western Kentucky Hilltoppers rally from 28 down to win a game, and I'm always down for the late strength of schedule boost for Ohio State, so I'll take that. 11 Warriors has a bowl pick'em going on right now, giving away a $100 gift card to 11 Warriors Dry Goods. 13 entries are a perfect 9-0. Wow. I went through and just chose chalk, basically every favorite team, and my bracket's 7-2. Do you know where yours is at?
No, I do not. I struggle. I need these bowl games to pick up a little bit. I think looking in the future, we got some better matchups, but man, I don't know how you guys do it. I see Slack lit up like, oh, I can't believe that catch, whatever. I'm like, man, I just don't know. I'll watch John Morant tonight instead.
No way. I will watch. You want John Morant over a bad football ball game, really?
100%. Yeah.
Oh, that's a terrible take. That's a terrible take.
The other night.
I'll watch Georgia Southern OU.
Hell, I'll watch Inside the NBA. I'll just watch Ernie and Charles and those guys talk for an hour before
watching hot takes.
Prairie View A&M and somebody. I just can't do it.
No, give me Western Kentucky and Old Dominion over Shaq saying that Draymond doesn't need counseling and that's how he played. Did you hear Shaq say that?
I was watching it. Yeah,
he's so dumb. He's so dumb. Dude.
You see that big coffee cup he has sitting there? It's like the size of a 2-liter.
Man. Shaq and a fool. Like he has no insight. We got Syracuse in South Florida later today. And that's the roofclaim.com. These bowl names are killer because every time I look up, I'm like, that's a new name I've never heard of before because the sponsors roll through
so change overnight. Yeah,
they do. In terms of like a decent Power 5 matchup, Saturday 7:30 in the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. You got Utah and Northwestern. I expect Northwestern to get lit up in that one, but I don't know. They won 7 games somehow, so they proved me. I thought this is a team that's going to win 2 this year, so who knows? Utah is about touchdown favorite in that one. Day after Christmas, man, Bowling Green, Minnesota in the Quick Lane Bowl. And then on, next Wednesday, start to get to some better games. Got Louisville and USC in the DirecTV Holiday Bowl. Go. Yeah, Louisville's favored by almost 8. Got no
Anybody
Caleb
playing
Williams.
in that one?
No, half of USC's in the portal, and
I
the
like how you
quarterback's
bet on
opted out.
these, which is what I need to draw me into games that I really don't care about. Is like, all right, can I at least throw a couple bucks on this? And
No way. I'll watch whatever bum they trot out at quarterback and give it to me.
no,
Man.
I know I'm in the minority. Like I said, I see all you guys going crazy over all these games. It's like, man, I don't know. I'll watch Beverly Hills Housewives or something with my wife.
Terrible take. Rutgers, Miami, and the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. And that's what is that one? That's next
I do want
Thursday.
to watch that one, yeah,
Because it's the U playing in New York City in December.
Yeah.
They're cooked. They could have like a supreme talent advantage, and Rutgers is going to beat the hell out of them in that game. They're just going to hammer them, man. Not going to
Well,
want
and
to be there.
those games come down to motivation too. I'm sure Rutgers will be pretty pumped to be in there. So yeah, I will definitely hate watch some of these lower tier games. That will be one.
Arizona, Oklahoma, a little top 15 matchup there. The Valero Alamo Bowl. That's later next Thursday. Then, of course, you got the Bucks next Friday. You also have Clemson, Kentucky. That'll be a weird one to watch because I don't like to root for the SEC that much, but I would probably have to root for them against Dabo.
Oh, yeah.
Oregon State, Notre Dame should be interesting on Friday as well. These both games are ahead of Ohio State. And then the last tune-up before Ohio State's Memphis, Iowa State, and the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. And I don't know if I'm, I'll watch a lot of games. I don't know how hype I can get for Memphis and Iowa State. And then Saturday, the 30th, you got Ole Miss, Penn State. That'll be a fun one. That's a Chick-fil-A Peach.
That's a good one.
I'll watch it. Auburn, Maryland should be a fun one. That's the Trans-Perfect Music City Bowl. Georgia, Florida State, another fun one. Georgia 14-point favorites in that one. That's the Capital One Orange Bowl. And then, Monday the 1st, you got Wisconsin, LSU, and the ReliaQuest. That'll be a good one. Liberty and Oregon in the VRBO Fiesta Bowl. Iowa, Tennessee in the Cheez-It Bowl. And then you have in the evening the two semifinal games. Alabama, Michigan, Texas, Washington. Big Bama fan for that one like I will be.
Oh yeah. We talked about it. Glad that Florida State was not in, even though it was a bad deal for them. Like the goal here is Michigan losing. Above all those games you rattled off, that's the only thing I really want to see. I'm curious though, Florida State and Georgia, you got a dog in that fight. I'm surprised there's not an injunction with all the the lawsuits and whatnot.
I think Georgia's going to murder them because their offense has been
I'm kind of
pretty
hoping
bad.
for it with just now that the Florida politicians are in it.
But who knows, man? Georgia's very
disinterested.
frustrated not to be in playing for something bigger. So I don't know. Both teams probably hate being there, and both coaches don't want to be there. So I'll probably tune in for that fact alone. Who do you like? The other, you got Alabama, Michigan in a 4-1 game, and you got Texas, Washington in 3-2. Who do you like to win both games, and who's your natty?
Man, yeah, that's tough. I definitely like Bama to beat Michigan. I think that'll be a really good game, but I think Saban with that long to prepare, and I give Michigan a ton of credit. I think they're pretty good also at scheming and finding deficiencies and whatnot and exploiting those. But Nick Saban is Nick Saban, so I got to roll with the Tide in that one. That other semifinal, that's gonna be really interesting. Texas is playing really well, obviously, but man, I don't know. I like Penix. I like that receiver. I'll probably go Washington in that one. And then, gosh, man, I don't even know for the title. Bama? I don't know. What do you got?
I'm going to go with Bama winning over Michigan in a close one. And then I got Washington winning over Texas, and I got Washington winning it all.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer, the guy's going to win a natty, man. I mean, Texas is favored in that game by almost 5 points, but I like Washington's football team, man. They beat Oregon twice. They've got a really good, somehow still underrated football team, and I have them winning it all. And you know what? The Big Ten can claim a national championship if they do win it all, right?
That's right. Yeah,
it's not the other Big Ten team who we don't want to win the national championship, so it works out, right?
Yeah, I won't be chanting Big Ten, in the fourth quarter of that game if that's how it works out. But yeah, I could definitely cheer for Washington in that scenario.
Yep, for sure. I did see one last thing before we let you guys go. Andy Staples of On3 had a really, really good point the other day with the opt-outs and some of these lesser bowls, and these players don't want to be there. He suggested the bowls step forward with an NIL package to get players to play. Here's an appearance fee, basically, is how that will work. And it's perfectly, in one sense, permissible because that is a marketing thing. The players using their name and image and likeness to add value to the business that's paying them. And that kind of meets some of that stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if they could get around any, rules that may prohibit it, I think you could make certainly makes the games interesting. I think it would work for some players, but I would see I wonder how many players would be like, well, fine, I'm opting out. Like, give me something when really, them opting out, nobody would really otherwise care. But I mean, if you're a Marvin Harrison Jr., like, what would it take for you to opt into this game, right? Like,
million.
Yeah, I mean,
$1 million.
So I don't know how tenable that is. I like the theory. I'm just trying to think, in practicality, how well it might work.
Yeah, I mean, the Bulls they're down bad right now because they used to just give guys watches, and pretty soon they might have to start giving them like $10,000, $25,000 to show up. So a little bit tougher, but got too many Bulls, man. There's too many. And again,
you're just saying you'd like watching December 3rd Bulls.
I'll watch them, but we have too many Bulls. We have too many Bulls.
Teams with losing records. We
do. It's ridiculous.
I can't.
Yeah. It is, but I'll watch because you know what? Some of these bad teams will give you the funniest football. Sometimes.
Oh, they will have crazy. Yeah. It's still college football. I get it. Yeah.
Still dudes out there being dudes and having a good time. So, yeah, man, I think that's all. Long one today, man. But thanks for starting your morning with us. Anything to add, Chris? Am I forgetting or?
No. Let's wrap it up.
All right, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good day, and go Bucks.